when the market is at its peak kind of fervour, everyone is just desperately frothing to get in. And you hear people saying things like, well, you can't lose in real estate, and that sort of nonsense. And everyone believes at that point there is no risk. And ironically, that is the time when risk is at its
100%.
peak.
Welcome back to the LoweDown. I'm here with my good friend Adam Cockburn, and today we're going to be talking about home ownership and whether it still makes sense. And Adam, it might sound like a sort of a basic question, but the reality is that we know that home ownership has been dropping in the last 30 years from about 7.4% to 66%.
Yes, 73, 74%. Back in, I think it peaked early 90s, I think, wasn't it? And 91. Then as of last time it was measured, 66%. So over 30-something year period, it's dropped 7 percentage points, or about 10% of what it was. But in the last few years, it's gone up, right? A couple of points, right? I mean, is that just because prices have come down and so it's more affordable, combined with a COVID effect, people wanting to nest more and feather up their home and make it beautiful again? Or
I think it was the boom that drove that. It was sort of 2023 that it went back up to so that was by 2023 it was higher than it was in 2018. So I think that 5 years there was a boom, and I think more people sort of jumped in. But the interesting question for me with this is, New Zealand has had such an obsession with property as a store of wealth, and so the question is the best thing that you can do with your money today to buy a home to live in, and is it an investment?
There's two questions there. The answer to the second question is it an investment? That's an easy one. The answer is no. That is not an investment. It's a home. The two are very different things. An investment is something that in the future, this is my definition of investment. Investment is something which produces income for you into the future. So you invest $100,000 today. If it produces $5,000 a year every year cash into your bank account, that's an investment, and then you can get your $100,000 back later, or maybe it's gone up to $200,000, whatever the case might be. But an investment puts money into your bank account ongoingly into time.
What about if I challenge you on that, and if I was just the general public and said, but hang on a second, property prices have gone up, by beaten inflation by many percentage points over the last 40 years. I'm buying my home for capital gain.
Yeah, but so then what are you going to do when the value of your house has doubled in 10 or 20 years, or whatever the case might be? Then what do? You sell it and buy another one? How have you gained? You've still got you still have to live somewhere, right? So you haven't. The only time when you actually get the benefit of that increase in value, assuming there is some, is when you downsize. So that's essentially selling. You're selling half your house if you downsize by 50%, right? The other thing to say is that over the last 40 years, you could definitely argue they've been extraordinary times, because you've had a structural shift in interest rates since the 1980s to today. They've gone from broadly something like 18% to 5%. Now, a bunch of ups and a bunch of downs along the way, and obviously a few years ago we were effectively at zero real interest rates, but that drop from 18% to 5%, where we are roughly today, that is a huge tailwind for the value of not just houses, all assets. So what is likely to happen in the next 40 years? Are we likely to have that same tailwind? We can't. We can't go from 18 down to 5 again in the next 40 years. So that's one major, I suppose, input that is likely to reduce the likelihood of strong capital growth in the future. But in any event, you just because the value of your home increases, does that make you better off? Not until you sell.
It's a bit of an illusion, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an illusion.
In terms of it, actually, I think though, a lot of New Zealanders, of course, have used it to retire at some point, in the sense that they would sell the house and downsize, or sell the house and go into a retirement village and use the equity to get into the retirement village. So it kind of has worked a little bit in that way, but it's certainly not going to give someone extra lifestyle, is it, in any way, shape or form. So it's not really an investment that's going to improve your future lifestyle.
No, that's right. I suppose some people might think of it like an equivalent to a superannuation account, which they never draw on until they're, say, 70 years old or however old. And they might see that as in a similar way. The only difference is, of course, you can draw out $1,000 at a time of your superannuation account, but you can't draw out $1,000 of your time unless you reverse mortgage it or something like that. But you sell the whole asset and take the entire lump. So they might consider it something like that. But there are many other ways, of course, to invest. But no, overall, I would suggest no. Your home is not an investment. And I can't remember the first question you said. Is now a smart time to?
Well, I'll come back to it. But just the point I was going to say is that another comment someone might make if they were in this discussion, they might say, well, it's true that I can't realize it unless I sell it and downsize, but I can leverage the equity out to buy something else or buy an investment.
100%.
Would you? But don't you think that the downside to that, of course, is you're just increasing your risk at that point, and so. And of course, not only are you increasing your risk, you're increasing your risk that you lose your family home because you're secured against your family home at that point. Right?
Yes, that's right. I mean, anytime you increase debt, you are increasing the risk, and there are times, of course, when the risk is higher than others, and with things like cash flow and so on. But and you can't predict the future of interest rates and that sort of thing. So that's why debt is inherently risky. That's right. Yep.
So if we're saying that your family home, you probably shouldn't really think about that as part of your investment portfolio, right? Like that would be a decent summary. You say you've got your investment portfolio for delayed gratification for future lifestyle increases 20, 30 years down the track.
Yeah.
And then you've got your home, which is, effectively where you live and your family's going to live, and you're always going to live somewhere. So don't really tie that up or think about it too hard as being, your sort of part of your investment portfolio.
100%. Yeah, that's right. Your invested assets are those assets that are producing income to assist with your lifestyle into the future, and the money your equity you've got in your home is your nest. It's your it's your abode. It's your it's where your family resides, and it's two very different things for sure.
What about renting versus buying? What do you think about that in today's world?
And as you indicated earlier, Craig, we do have this fascination with home ownership, don't we? I mean, everywhere you look, people are talking about home ownership, and sure, there are benefits, but it's not everything, don't you think?
It's 100%. It's to a large degree, it's emotional. It's a sentiment. Like we feel somehow better about the fact we own something. It's kind of almost like a magpie kind of, like a sort of we're gathering these resources and we feel satisfied because we have a resource.
Yep.
But actually, when you and I know, houses are a pain in the neck.
Oh, houses are expensive.
Yeah.
Houses eat your cash.
Yeah.
They literally gobble it up.
And when you're renting, actually there are some real advantages to renting, right?
Absolutely. So the taps leaks or something, you just call the landlord and it's their responsibility to come fix it up. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to make phone calls. You don't have to take half a day off work to meet the plumber.
You got flexibility. You got to some degree. You got.
That's it. I'm selling.
That's right. So, but also, I think there is a stability. We talked about this earlier too. There's a stability and a security, which I think comes more into play once you are. Once you have a family, doesn't it? You don't want to have to move if a landlord sort of comes back or suddenly wants to kick you out.
I mean, no one wants to. I mean, a lot of time, if you're renting, there's always this just concern kind of hanging over your head that maybe you'll get asked to leave at some point because they want to renovate something or the family want to come back to live there or whatever. So you're not in control, right, of your own environment. And I suppose
can't renovate it, can't make it your own.
No, that's right. I mean, you just don't settle into it and worry about the way it looks and make it super comfortable for yourself because it's temporary, right? I mean, so is a home that you own is temporary. But anyway, coming back to the original point, which is that there's this fascination. I mean, it's almost like the second national pastime after the All Blacks. But there's nothing wrong with renting. There's nothing wrong with renting.
And often you can get a better lifestyle than you'd be able to afford to buy anyway, right?
100%.
That's common.
100%, And so in many situations, I think the smart move actually is to rent instead of own.
And it allows you to think about other assets like, shares or
the vast
investing in
majority
business,
of
starting
time.
a business and not having to a mortgage to pay. And
look, the truth is that if you don't own a home, almost certainly you are going to have way more disposable income. Houses are expensive. They cost a lot of money to pay for and to maintain.
And then all of a sudden you want to make them pretty. And
that's right. So there goes 50 grand on your kitchen and all the rest of it, right? So yeah, absolutely. And in fact, when when I sell a home to a first home buyer, I often tell them, "Oh, congratulations! Now you're going to know what real expenses are."
Yeah.
I mean, that's facetious and sarcastic sort of thing, but it's true. And so, if you don't own a home, you have way more disposable resources now. And some people, they don't have a lot of disposable resource, and so owning a home actually just puts them under enormous pressure. And in that sort of situation, that's definitely not helpful.
And of course, the sad thing is that people get more interested in this right at the wrong time, don't they? When prices are,
when FOMO's absolutely running rife,
and everyone's got to get in, and of course that's even worse because then you're not only are you buying an asset with a huge amount of drama, cost attached to it, and ongoing
at the highest
risk point.
That, I mean, it's the same with any. I mean, I'm now going to refer back to investment, and we've talked about that at home is not your investment. But when you're buying any asset, when the market is at its peak kind of fervour, everyone is just desperately frothing to get in. And you hear people saying things like, well, you can't lose in real estate, and that sort of nonsense. And everyone believes at that point there is no risk. And ironically, that is the time when risk is at its
100%.
peak.
Yeah, 100%.
And at times like now, where everyone is running for the hills and all anyone can see is risk, these are the times when actually risk is lowest. So it's completely counterintuitive. And I think we've talked about it before, haven't we, that you can easily read in a book that you should invest counter-cyclically. So when everyone's buying, you should sell, and when everyone's selling, you should buy. Oh, that makes totally logical sense. But you put yourself in that situation and
much harder
to actually act.
It's easy to say and hard to do. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and also because sometimes credit is harder to get. And if a lot of people, this is the issue with leverage, isn't it? The more, and also, for the people that bought their own home and have a big mortgage, then assets get cheap. Suddenly they can't take advantage of it because they've got this mortgage at higher interest rates. Because in the bottom, the higher interest rates start to go up, and then the market collapses, and suddenly you've got expensive debt that you're servicing, and you can't take advantage of these prices. So that's often one of the reasons why the cycle is a cycle.
Totally. So at its very peak in say mid 2021, is it true that there was no risk in the housing market?
Of course not.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Equally, is it true now that there's no risk in the housing market?
No, of course
there isn't. Yeah. But all people can see is risk. So conversely, is it true that right now there's no opportunity?
No, there's heaps of opportunity.
There's tons of opportunity, but so both are always present. But right now, all that people can see is risk. And nobody is seeing the opportunity.
That's right. No, I agree with that, and hence why you just got to take the temperature and take a long-term view. Right?
Yeah.
So in terms of if we think about timing for this stuff, I think if we're wrapping together some of the things that the lines of thought that we've had here, if you are young, right? If you want to buy assets when you're young, you can do that without the worry of family to support, so the time to start a business, for example, or to take more risk in your life, to build a share portfolio and become really good at that form of investment. So, the time to do that is when you're young, for two reasons. One of them is because you don't have dependents. You're not worried about.
You got a low cost base.
Got a low cost base. You don't have to worry about that. So you can do things like you could rent a better lifestyle than you could afford to buy and own. You could then spend this time investing or learning how to do that, spending all your time on that. Take more risk. You could build a business. You could invest your time and effort into being productive in the world and using that as your investment vehicle, for example, which can be incredibly successful for people. And the problem is once you get a family, then of course you want stability. Renting, maybe the things shift and they move away from the idea that
you no longer want to live in a 2-bedroom apartment or whatever by the waterfront,
or somewhere where you might get kicked out, right? Or
you want a bigger home. You've got more people to accommodate. You want things like backyards and that sort of thing. But.
And the last reason to do it then too is because you've got time and compounding on your side. So to be honest, I think people underestimate compounding even in shorter periods. Doesn't take long. Compounding doesn't take long to, even if you're in your 50s, you can still,
definitely,
very much should still try and understand compounding because it still works.
Yeah, I think what was the I can't remember the exact statistic, but something like 99% of Warren Buffett's wealth was accumulated since he was 65.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen that example as well, and In fact, I read, his biographer, Alice, I can't remember her last name, but in that book, Snowball.
The Snowball.
And she said, I remember seeing an interview with her where she said one of the things
Schroeder,
that's right, Alice Schroeder. She said one of the insights she learned from him or made her feel better about is that, it was in her 50s when she wrote the book. She's like, I've got heaps of time. I've got heaps of time. He really showed her that actually life doesn't end financial life doesn't end at your 50s. You don't have to panic.
No, you're not like an athlete. Your ability to invest actually just improves with age and experience and wisdom.
Exactly. But
unlike a 100-meter runner or something.
But regardless of those facts, you start investing in your 20s.
Yeah.
And things are going to be incredibly easier for you when you're in your 50s. So it's good to do it early. And so what do you think about, like, sort of summarizing it really depends on where you are in life. So that's an important thing as to whether home ownership or renting is the right thing to do and whether it's a good investment, today or not for you. What about holiday homes? What do you think about, because,
the classic Kiwi bach.
Yeah, this is like, like when I was growing up, this was the Kiwi dream, right? Was that you had you had a home that you lived in, and maybe you had a little shack somewhere on the beach that you could take your family to on the weekends.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
So again, if we're talking about is home ownership a good investment and so on, I mean the bach or a holiday home is the same except probably worse.
Probably worse.
Yeah. Because you're not living in it every day. No, 100%. Owning a holiday home, nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying don't do it, but don't do it and kid yourself that it's for investment purposes, because it's a terrible investment. There's just another roof to maintain. There's another garden to do. There's more, all the maintenance, rates, insurance, the headache of it. I mean, if you're wanting somebody to go on holiday, why would you want to go back to the same place time after time after time after time?
But if you do enjoy that, because some people if some people like the family memories, what about the argument that, I'll get capital gain because I've got multiple properties, I'm leave it into them all, and over time things will go up. What do you think?
Sure, but if you're going to have multiple properties, you might as well own multiple properties that actually pay you instead of ones that drain your resources. Because if you've got, instead of owning one holiday home that costs you $30,000 a year or $50,000 a year, you could own 5 properties that cost you nothing. And the capital gain will be tremendously greater than owning a holiday home. Now, having said this, look, I've got got 2 very, very close friends. Both of them have holiday homes, out of Wellington, and they absolutely love it. And one of the things that they love about it, and I'm sure this is common, is the ability for the family to have a base to come back to, and like extended family, cousins, uncles, aunties, grandparents, and so on, and close friends. And I go and visit them, from time to time, and it's wonderful. We've got this base, and everyone can come back there.
Beautiful family memories, right?
Fantastic, exactly. Especially if it's over a long period of time, and you would have seen people who are looking to sell something, and the kids are going, "Oh, you can't get rid of that. That's our grandma's home," or whatever the case might be, right? And that is because they're so emotionally attached and connected to it. And they have these wonderful, fond memories of it, and so that's something that is great about a holiday house. You can imagine, the family photos on the wall of all the holidays as the kids are growing up and the cousins playing together and all that sort of stuff on the front lawn.
So let's rationalize this, right? So if you think about it then, and what does that mean if you're thinking about from a financial perspective and a sentiment perspective? The way I would put it is that it really depends on where you are in your financial life.
Yeah.
Because if you are having to lever borrow for your family home, and you have to borrow for your holiday home. Yeah, you're taking a huge amount of risk for something that doesn't have any cash flow, right? Or has a huge amount of issues attached to the cash flow, like having to manage Airbnb stuff, or long-term rental when you can't use it, or you've got to find ways to get cash flow out of it, which is a real headache, right? And then people are going to abuse it, and suddenly you've got those dramas to deal with, all just for a feeling of sentiment, for a feeling of like something that's kind of more.
So, I mean, those things are lovely, right? And the sentiment and the family memories and the holidays and all that sort of stuff, that's all wonderful stuff, great for families. Just be honest with yourself about how expensive it is.
Yes, that's right. So my point.
Everything has a cost.
So my point was going to be, if your wealth exceeds the level where you don't have to leverage to do it, it's just,
if it's easy for you.
But then it's a consumption of money, and you're being purposeful about going, I'm going to put this money in a low return environment for family memories.
Because I'm getting other benefits
Because I'm getting
out
other
of it.
benefits. I'm getting value out of it.
Getting these family benefits. It's not
Yeah.
about the money.
And if you think
I
about
can
it,
afford it, and I want those benefits.
Now-
It's not an investment.
now let's imagine that you never get to that level of wealth. If you actually think about rationally, does it matter? I mean, you can choose which holiday home you rent on the weekend.
yeah.
You can go to different places. It doesn't really have to change your lifestyle at all, really.
No.
And sure, there's some, kind of sentimental stuff that you're not building family memories, or you can choose.
Way vastly cheaper to go on holiday 5 times a year at someone else's place.
My wife and I rented the same place in the Coromandel for 7 years in a row.
Right.
And the kids built memories there. It was fun.
Oh,
And
okay, so you get the same benefit.
They wouldn't have had any knowledge that it wasn't. They don't think about ownership, do they? It was great. We used to have friends come visit us in the same place, and we didn't have to own it, didn't have to have money tied up in it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
True.
So if you do want to go back to the same place every time, you still can.
No niggle. Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to own it.
Exactly. I mean, there might be, might get sold, or there might be reasons why you can't make it, but then you just choose a new one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I find it fascinating that I think the key is not to do it too early, not to get emotional about it, and go and do it when your wealth really isn't at the point where something like that is a sustainable option. I think.
Yep.
You handicap your ability to buy other assets that are going to appreciate and give you cash flow because your leverage is too great.
Yeah. So this whole conversation, we've really talked about housing as an investment. What about, is now a good time to buy a home? If you do decide you want a home, because that's what the point you are in life, is now a good time to buy a home? Does it make sense to own a home
Well,
today?
I think it's still going to get better, if I'm honest. But this is a short-term speculation, so it's not.
Sorry, what's going to get better?
The timing to buy a home.
You think the buying's going to get better?
Not necessarily because I think prices are going to continue to drop dramatically, but because I think we're in a period of stagnation now, and particularly in Wellington, but maybe wider. But I think we've still got a few years to run on this bumpy road we're on.
So what you're saying is, if nominal prices go sideways, then in a year's time it's easier to buy it because you've saved for more money. That sort of thing.
Maybe your income's gone up.
Yeah, your income's gone up. So on a real basis, it's cheaper. Even if the number of dollars is the same.
Exactly right.
Yeah, 100%. I'm dealing with a couple at the moment who are looking to buy a place, and they were thinking about buying something 18 months later. They could afford 800, 900,000. They decided not to. They saved for a bunch, and now they're looking 1.1, 1.2 million because the prices have gone sideways.
The flip side is you never know when things do change. So really,
when it changes slowly and then all at once.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But the real estate market tends to be the latter half of the economic cycle where it gets exciting, and we're right in the pit of particularly Wellington is in the doldrums economically.
Yep.
So there's this is years, not months. Before things really improve, and it will improve like it did last time, I'm sure, or every other cycle I've been through. With suddenly there are gains in a year, right? And suddenly there's a 5% or 6% or more, and then and usually that's the start of a run that goes for years, not a short-term blip.
Yeah, but picking when that happens is impossible, isn't it?
No,
it's difficult. It's impossible.
No.
And once it is hot like that, it gets tough.
So how can we wrap this up? I would say this: if I was going to summarize what we've said to try and be useful for people, it would be, depending on where you are in life, think hard about whether a home really is the right investment. If you can take risks like building a business or investing in other income-producing assets to grow wealth for the long term, and you don't have any dependence, it's a great time to do it.
Yeah,
just consider, is buying a house that, and suddenly getting tied up in all the niggly things, the maintenance, the real costs of it, which are very high, and the idea you want to renovate it, all this stuff, that's not where you're going to build your long-term wealth. If, different story, if you are, family, need somewhere stability, it would certainly make sense to be looking now or over the next few years and buying it. I think you do very, very well, buying when risk is when it's less risky because prices
it
have come back.
appears so risky, therefore there's less risk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the traps of things like holiday homes and all that stuff. Just be careful about whether you really are being purposeful about the emotion involved here, and that's what you really want to really need, and not taking too much risk just because it's going to feel good. Yeah,
100%. I just thought of one kind of exception. I know you're trying to wrap up there, and this is going to make it slightly longer, but the one exception would be that you're assuming there that yes, technically it's the time to do it. Invest is earlier on, and the house doesn't make the best investment, and so on. A lot of people don't have that discipline. When they have all this extra spare resource or the extra cash flow, they just spend it because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to go on holidays and buy new cars and
Great
fancy
point.
clothes and all the rest of it. So I suppose you've got to be honest with yourself and say, if I am going to unlock $100 a week, $500 a week, whatever the case might be, have I got the discipline to actually apply that resource to building an asset that's going to produce income in the long term? If the answer is no, because you're just not that kind of personality, putting it into a home
forces you to do it.
Forces you to pay that mortgage every month. And so in that sort of situation, it probably is a good thing to buy a home.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to teach your brain to be rational and to find discipline and learn how to do these things. And I think they can be taught and learned. But
100%.
But I agree with you. Yeah.
A lot of people just don't have the will for it. They don't want to. And that's also nothing wrong with that.
100%. Yeah. Great chat, Adam.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you very much. That was the Lowdown. Can't wait to do it again. And please like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Time.